The Quest Podcast, Funds Industry Conversations.
Hello podcast listeners and welcome to a new season of the Quest Podcast with me, Danny Lawler. I'm delighted to be joined by Paul Price for this episode. Paul is the CEO and founder of a new investment firm called Haven Green Investment Management. Haven Green is an outsourced distribution function that specialises in the marketing of investment funds with a sustainability focus. So our discussion covers both topics of outsourced distribution functions and also sustainability and his team's passion for identifying and marketing investment funds that can do better. But before all that, we begin our discussion by chatting about Paul's experience as a business owner. He was an executive in a large international financial services group for a number of years, so this is quite a shift for him. It's very interesting to get his take on his new life. If you like the episode, please do hit like and subscribe, share with your friends, and with that, let's get on with the show.
The Quest Podcast, Funds Industry Conversations.
Hi Paul, welcome to the Quest Podcast.
Cheers, Danny.
Great to have you here. Paul is the CEO and founder of a new MiFID firm called Haven Green. Tell us a little bit about Haven Green.
Yeah, Haven Green is an idea that I've been playing out for a number of years in my head, really focusing on a belief that the market was going to bifurcate into the different functions that are within an investment management business, and one of those is the marketing, client servicing and sales. And we think that this, as much as you outsource your administrative function, people would eventually do that. However, we put a twist on it. I developed myself a passion for the whole area of sustainability and impact investing in the last number of years, and understanding the absolute need for this. And I thought there was a need for a firm that expressed that and helped boutiques at the early stages who normally struggle to actually build their businesses or get their messaging fixed for the buyer behavior that's out there. And we would create an outsourced department that could actually do that for them. And that's effectively what Haven Green turned out to be, connecting asset owners with smart boutiques in the investment management business that ordinarily would not get to have that audience looking at them.
So before we get into Haven Green, just to cast back, you're a professional in the financial services industry for a number of years. You're top of the tree in a big international financial services organisation, and you decide to jack it all in and do your own thing.
Yeah.
What on earth were you thinking?
Yes, and then quite promptly after that, then we had the whole pandemic hit, and so it created an interesting point of inflection. I suppose after 35 years of my professional career, I thought that from an age profile where I'm at, that I really wanted to make a difference with the remaining part of the time that I had to work within the industry. And I felt it had to be centered around sustainability impact. It's driven by being a dad and wanting to actually ensure that we hand back, a better outcome for my children, my grandchildren, and future generations for the planet. So it really was driven by that. And so very altruistic from my perspective. However, I also believe that you have to do these in a practical way. It has to be done in a way where, that it is commercial and not just, something that's very philanthropic. And that's what was the idea behind trying to create a Haven Green wrapper around this. Yeah, I had a fantastic career from my perspective, enjoyed it thoroughly, traveled extensively, but now is a chance to do this in a very bespoke and individual fashion, which I am very much looking forward to.
Are you enjoying being a business owner?
I am enjoying it, yes. Obviously there are entirely different dynamics when you don't have a balance sheet behind you, and as you build a business out, the sleep well factor is something that you actually become more appreciative of. However, the tough times in it, I think, are compensated by those high moments when things start to go right, and we get a confluence of events of something that you expected would happen and suddenly it does, and that creates a great excitement and a buzz around the team. And we have a team that stretches from Australia to Japan to Latin America into the European market and then into obviously our head office based out of Dublin. And seeing that dynamic working across a multiplicity of geographies is actually really heartening from our perspective. And I think quite exciting for where the future is in terms of the conscientious buyer behavior that we think is going to be happening more and more.
I'm really interested in the two sort of prongs to the business. One is the outsourced distribution function, and the second is the sustainability focus. So let's start with the second, the sustainability focus. What's your sense for where the market is at in terms of sustainability? It's obviously being a kind of a buzzword, for want of a better phrase. Yeah. Is it something that you're seeing tons of traction in? Is it still a novelty?
Yeah, I think there's lots of news about it, and I would that is for sure. But really, trying to find innovative investment management offerings that actually have real-world application and commercial reality behind them, as in able to deliver returns that will stand toe-to-toe with those who actually don't have that sustainability function, is really important. And that's a really important imperative to have in the business. So yes, I think there's a lot of talk about it. Finding the managers in this space, I think, is a challenge. Undoubtedly, right now, we're seeing a lot of money move to funds that ostensibly are branded in the sustainability and impact space. I do think that there is going to be some retrenchment on those, and we've seen a little bit of with the Article 9 to Article 8 move across the industry, and I think that retrenchment will continue for as people understand the higher standard that one must be held accountable to if you're an Article 9 fund, what you have to do to be an Article 8 fund in terms of your sustainability credentials, and I think that's realism, or an injection of realism that I think is healthy on the market itself. So today my view is a lot of noise about it. Definitely there's a lot of discussions around the allocation. I think the real surge is not yet upon us, and I think it has been somewhat stalled by geopolitical events in terms of the war in Ukraine. It's been stalled by somewhat by the pandemic, but in some ways all of these things eventually put us all in a thought pattern or trajectory that says this isn't going to be important on a go forward. In energy independence, as an example, at a national state level is going to become a critical part of all governments' thinkings. And I think actually how you build that infrastructure can only come through the use of the capital markets and through the use of long-term investors and their commitment to investing for returns for shareholders and for pensioners in the long term. And I think harnessing that is actually a good example of the change that I think is actually going to drive some of the volume into the market.
And I know I saw in your blog post on your website, and you used the phrase carbon jargon, which I think is a good way of summing up the noise around, but not necessarily followed through with the impact that some of the firms kind of claim to have. So just so people know, I guess Haven Green works with a small number of investment managers that are focused on sustainability. And how do you sift through them when you look at a potential manager to work with? And we know, SFDR and Article 8 and 9, as you mentioned, but how do you what's the flags that you look out for? What is it that you are on the alert for as you kind of sift through whether a manager is what they say they are?
So it's similar to going back to the previous comment. The first thing we do is, independent of the sustainability and impact credentials of the managers, is assess them as an investment management firm. We're looking at their philosophy, their process, the portfolio construction and risk, the people who are involved in the business itself, and the outcomes that have come and that they have been able to achieve in terms of performance. What you're looking for is robustness at this stage and repeatability. So that's the first screen and most important screen. We call that our CIO screen of the managers themselves. The next is then to get a deeper dive on the sustainability and impact side. Are you, in your view, finished on your journey? Are you in the transitionary phase? And by the way, we actually are very much a house that would look for managers who believe in transition. We don't think there is just one big bang solution. Everything changes tomorrow. I think it would be a mistake for that to be something we would promote. So then we look for that sustainability and impact credentials. What is the USP? Are you doing it better than anybody else? Is it something that the market will actually feel that there is a need for? And then you get onto the due diligence questionnaires, which are the standard checkout of the infrastructure of the manager and ensuring that that's in place. And this is all for us to validate internally for ourselves, that we're working with a manager we could be proud of to support and promote out in the market outside, and to speak about and have as one of our managers that represents what we want to be seen for as standing for in the market.
And as the team that you have here, being very experienced financial services professionals, I guess, are used to that sifting through of potential investment managers and looking for those that have delivered performance in the past and have something that will work into the future. Is there anything that, or the kinds of things that you might see in terms of the sustainability side that might be a flag for you, you'd say, maybe that's not for us? Or alternatively, the kind of stuff you'd see and say, yeah, that's really where we want to be?
Yeah, so you see a lot of products with 15 and 20-year track records today in the market. And they've come from a historic position. I would say I would be highly skeptical that they were all sustainability and impact focused for the entire tenure of that track record. So from our perspective, one of the most important things is to see what effectively are you doing differently since you changed this projection of your image as a firm, whether it's changing the branding of your product or the naming convention of your product, or you decided that this product now you're going to apply to make it an Article 9 or an Article 8. What has fundamentally changed from what you've done in the past? Because the reality of it is there are very few of these products out there that were already deeply rooted in credentials, from a credential perspective in the sustainability and impact space. So we would look for that at first, so that this is very important that this change that we're hopefully going to be part of it, that we want to be a catalyst, part of a catalyst for, is something that's meaningful, and that it's not, as some people have, you referred to it earlier, carbon jargon, or like talking about I'm a low carbon product, and nothing different has happened. It just happens to be that's the way you position yourself against the index. And what is the further work that you've done beyond that actually ensures that is part of, is that an accidental place you found yourself as a result of the mandate you have, or is that a conscientious place that you found yourself in? And if it is conscientious, what is your process for continuing to protect that conscientious position that you have within your portfolio? And
what are the kinds of products and strategies that you're working with at the moment, or are kind of in the pipeline? What is it that these firms are investing in, or these funds are investing in?
The exciting products that we find out there, some of them come from, what I would say is the very historic part of the market. So bottom-up stock picking shops that go out, do fundamental research in equities. We believe that is one of the most powerful tools to deliver sustainability and impact in the equity space. And the rationale for that is because you're actually speaking directly to companies. You have the opportunity to influence companies' behaviors. If you're speaking to a fossil fuel company, you should ask about stranded assets. You should ask about their net zero targets. You should indicate to them what your position is around the net zero targets relative to the competitors that you're also talking to in the fossil fuel space. And I think that's a really powerful tool that we have within the investment management industry. So as a result of which, we have one particular manager we work with in the global value space. And when we're speaking with them, we're talking to them about how they interrogate their managers. And that's what got us to a position of comfort with them, because value would traditionally have not been seen as an area where you could actually take it to a point where there is an element of sustainability, or focus on environmental or governmental or governance issues or social issues. But however, when you are a bottom-up stock picker, you have that power. And I think that is really important. The second area on the equity side that we thought could work here is using the vast array of technology that's around there to work on quantitative tools, and focusing on how, from a quantitative perspective, one can actually assess the available market opportunity. So if you look at an index, how do you optimize an index from the point of view of resource efficiency, waste, water, carbon, and do that in a clever way, reconstructing a portfolio that still gives you your exposure from an indexation perspective, but potentially has the ability also to give you alpha. But fundamentally, the same portfolios side by side, one is giving you an efficiency that cannot be delivered by a straight passive approach to that. So again, using the technology that's available that perhaps wasn't available 10, 15 years ago to do that. And then the whole area of focusing in on the thematics in the market. How do you actually reflect renewable energy in a portfolio? How do you look at infrastructure in a sustainable way? How do you think about water usage? And to my mind, sustainable thematics is the way that we're going to see that on a pillar by pillar basis. So trying to focus on those areas on the equity side has been an extremely exciting journey for us, and trying to find managers. And the one thing that is clear in that process is managers who are committed to change and committed to do radical change, as we have had with our the partners on the value side, are the managers who are doing prospecting using new quantitative methods, are those who are building on the pillar thematic approach, sustainable thematics. They're not as common. as one would expect in the market. However, one would hope if these are successful and peers like them are successful, that it will begin to breed a new generation of managers who see this as an appropriate way to actually use the tools and the intelligence that they have in terms of delivering better outcomes, in terms of planetary outcomes, while at the same time not sacrificing returns for pensioners who ultimately, in a lot of circumstances, are the savers, individual savers that are behind these pools of assets.
Yeah, it sounds like a very powerful proposition when it's both rigorous investment approach with the investment performance allied to sustainability and an approach that's better for the planet and for the future.
Yes.
And I know doing a little bit of work with the team here when we had to bring to a close a very passionate discussion about whether investing in a concrete production company that was making improvements was a better, for want of a better word, or sustainable or a greener investment than investing in, say, a green tech firm. When we were here, we did close that out to chat about regulatory and compliance. Now, not regulatory and compliance isn't something to get excited about, but you could really feel the passion amongst the team when they were talking about subjects like this. It felt like it mattered.
Absolutely, and that goes back to the recruitment process that we've undertaken. Look, I mean, I'm doing this because I've made a very distinct decision of what I want the next 10 years to look like. From my perspective, from a career perspective, and bringing the skills that I have in it, I've just looked for like-minded people across the team, those who actually have a passion for this area, who have a commitment. And yes, our debates are very passionate on this. And we have a broad church of thinking. You know, we have in some instances managers who are in the transitionary phase. We have in some instances managers who are deep in green impact. And you come at those from different angles as a group. And and some people will have a preference for the deeper green impact. Others will believe that the transitionary phase is something we have to be able to promote, because that is where we will take companies, underlying companies, on the journey with us. And I think that that's extremely important. So yeah, I like the fact that we have a bunch of people who are entirely different. So we have a group think in terms of we all care about sustainability and impact. We do not have a group think in terms of the implementation of it. That's why those debates can get quite passionate. Which I think is a great thing to see on any team.
Absolutely, it was very interesting. When you think about the way that the legislation is trying to support this, obviously at European level you've got the European Green Agenda, and here, particularly in asset management, we have SFDR, and it's something that sets out, like a lot of initiatives, as a good idea, but as you try and wade through and add detail to it and you try and distinguish how do I know that somebody's not greenwashing here, it gets quite complicated and convoluted and runs the danger of being a growth initiative for the lawyers. Now, I'm all for growth initiatives for lawyers, but what's your sense for that? Like, will it work? Is it too complicated? Is it being over-engineered? Or how do you prevent greenwashing, I guess?
Yeah, so ironically, from a practitioner's perspective, I actually am not resistant at all to this, the more legislatively driven approach. I think the market to its own devices wasn't getting there. So I think it is no harm that we actually have guardrails as to what is an appropriate mechanism to do, whether that's this Article 8 and Article 9. Having said that, I think there will be compromises around this, and I think there has to be compromises from where it is today, and I think we will learn. I think the regulatory oversight will also learn as to what can work and what can't work. Ultimately, if both parties are coming to it that we want to get to a solution that actually does make a difference, as distinct from just satisfying rules, if it comes down to that there are rigid rules and if you satisfy within those rules, that's enough. I don't think that's enough is a good answer. I think it has to be that there is a fluidity around this, because we will not get the answer right the first time. But I think the step towards what we're doing in SFDR and the initiatives around that and the application of it, I feel are taking us in the right direction. I think we are a long way from the conclusion of where this is going to settle. But I think we had to have the impetus of the push to come from the regulatory environment on that.
It feels like the market is also starting to push there with the heightened need for national energy security. That feels like it's going to be a huge driver for this, that it's not taken for granted now, it's appreciated more by everybody as to how important it is. So
and I think
going to change things, isn't it?
I think the whole, just even take that point, that's like a change that people aren't really thinking about how they factor into portfolios. Energy production at a country level, even across the European Union, until we get to a full supergrid structure, is going to become a national security asset issue. It is going to be something that governments and regions are going to protect, because it is what is going to keep the lights on, it's what's going to keep the citizens happy. And I think actually the concept that singular managers are going to be able to get you access to all these national security assets around the world, in my view, is a fallacy. I don't think, no matter how big the firm is, given the scale of these projects, it's incredibly difficult for you to raise enough in a singular fund that will get you exposure on a pan-European basis from a geographic perspective across Asia, across Latin America, and across the multifaceted areas of renewables that you could go from, like whether it's wind or solar or geothermal or what. Trying to do that through one medium, in my view, is going to be extremely different. So there is going to be a compromise from the industry's perspective in the realization that a different way of approaching dealing with renewables and how you deal with it in particularly the private market space is going to be very important. I think we're going to see the growth of, single use funds. Maybe they're focused just on anaerobic digestion. Are you going to see the growth of multi-manager approaches to renewable energy and renewable assets and building that out? And again, on the listed side, I think you're going to see the growth, again, back to my earlier point, of the sustainable thematics, focused on renewables, focused on transition, energy transition, and focused on water, because we tend to think about it all in terms of renewables and how we keep power going. The reality of it is the actual essence of life is actually protecting our water supplies and the efficacy of those. And that's actually going to be another critical infrastructural demand right through the emerging markets and even throughout developed markets as well. So I think we have the pillars that are going to be created as a result of whether it's geopolitical events or just heightened awareness and thinking about these areas, I think are going to create sort of the new breed of asset management firms that actually think deliver solutions, holistic solutions that are better served for the future world we want to live in rather than the past world we have.
I know we're starting to run out of time, and I did want to touch on the kind of distribution, the outsourced distribution side of the business. As you mentioned, funds always delegate to investment managers and delegate to fund administrators those tasks. Why hasn't delegation of kind of outsourced distribution functions happened before? It seems a very obvious way to go.
I think it has happened insofar as there's a third-party marketing industry, I think of which there's some 200 of those across Europe alone. However, in the vast majority of cases, they haven't been operating through regulated structures. And I think that's going to be the change. I think the reality of it is the regulatory environments that we have in take just the European market itself gives us the mechanism for actually deliverance of this in a regulated company, which is effectively what we have done with the Irish regulator in the setup of Haven Green Investment Management. And I think that's just going to be the underlying trend. And perhaps that's one of the reasons why larger firms have shied away from this space, because they will be at the core regulated, then they're delegating to parties that have not got a full regulatory status. That creates a risk in an organization. So being regulated and being held accountable to a national and competent authority in the European Union, I think is a very important assurance point that we have for the underlying managers to consider it. And that's why even now I can see this moving more and more into the mainstream. There is also the other side, why it didn't happen before, is that people tended to have it in-house, and that's a very big cost to have in-house. And the reality of it is that if you have a private markets strategy, it's in market, it's out of market then for 2 years or 3 years. So what do you do at that time period with your sales teams? Then you have to find other product to fill it with. The reality of it is that you may compromise on the products that you're actually trying to fill it with in those intervening times, because nobody can be good at everything. What we hope to do is try and find managers which will fill the space for us, who we think we would be proud to represent, and not that we will always get it right in every manager. There's no doubt about that. Everyone will have compromise moments in this. But the reality of it is that you try and actually deliver in the long term an array of managers. Again, back to that point, who you fundamentally feel that you're proud of in terms of the story they're telling, the deliverable they have, and how they actually support what you're trying to do as a brand.
Yeah, and of course raising capital into a fund is the lifeblood
Indeed.
regardless of what the strategy is or how meritorious it is or otherwise.
Yeah.
So having professionals on board to lead that exercise, critical really.
Building experienced relationship alpha in an organization, I think, is incredibly important. People who have gained the respect through their careers out there in the marketplace, who have the opportunity to get that audience for a manager who ordinarily would not get that audience. Just because of the methodology of screening and such that is out there rightly in the market, because there's a volume of managers and allocators can't look at every single manager who just sends them a cold email. So having somebody who has the credibility to say, look, I'm from a reputational perspective, I'm very proud of this manager as part of the company that I have joined, is actually, I think, a solid endorsement to at least begin that initial stage of conversation and hopefully see it progress to a positive outcome.
So as we wrap up, Paul, it sounds like you're going to be a busy boy in 2023.
Indeed. And I suspect 2023 is beginning to loosen up in terms of people's willingness to hear about this and to hear about the stories around that one can share around where the sustainability agenda could go in the next few years. And we're super excited and looking forward to how the next year pans out and the years to come.
Well, we will watch with interest and wish you all the best. Thanks very much, Paul, for joining us in this episode of the Equest podcast.
Cheers.
The Equest podcast, Funds Industry Conversations.